This is video 12 of the Effective Child Protection course for child protection practitioners. Section 7 is the last video in this course. Section 7 brings all the content together, recaps the key points across all the exercises and sections. We remind ourselves that effective child protection is based on 4 elements. These are better conversations, consistent thresholds, a focus on change, and measuring progress. As a practice framework, it is primarily focused on change to keep children safe. To facilitate this, effective child protection emphasizes 4 elements that contribute to keeping children safe. These are collaborative conversations with families about change, discussions that motivate and avoid generating resistance, good and consistent decisions about significant harm, so that the threshold is tested, there is clarity about when care is not good enough, and that taking child protection interventions can be justified. Practice that focuses on change, focuses on the change necessary to achieve good enough care, change that is linked to the risk of significant harm, keeping focus on the change and clearly communicating it to families. Practice that measures its progress in achieving change, so that families have an understanding of the journey, their successes, and clarity about what still needs to be done. These 4 components are represented as 4 jigsaw pieces. Each piece of the jigsaw represents an important element. Individually applied, they will enhance child protection practice. The model brings all of these together as a framework for intervention. During this effective child protection training course, you have looked at each of these 4 elements. This course focused mainly on the areas of change and measure. The knowledge to enable you to write a change statement and the steps to change are the main features of these 2 elements. When we looked at change, we identified what enabled change and what created barriers. We emphasized change talk and how this should be amplified, taking opportunities to talk about change with families. The way we talked with families was important so that we were able to engage families. Adopting collaborative communication or motivational interviewing approaches helped to reduce barriers in relationships with families. Whilst structure and forms are important to frame the conversations, conversations are more important than forms. It is those conversations that create lasting change. When focusing on change, it was important to ensure that changes in effective child protection are directly linked to reducing the risk of significant harm. These were aspects that were related to conversations and thresholds. As we moved to change and measure, exercises 2 and 3 gave you the opportunity to review a case example from your own practice and identify 3 changes linked to significant harm. You developed your own change statement and provided evidence why care was not good enough and how things should be if care was good enough. You developed one of these changes and used a method to score, monitor, and measure progress. You developed your own steps to change. The first exercise in video 2 was a personal change exercise. The purpose of this exercise was to connect our discussion about change to your own experience. This avoided us thinking about change as being a challenge to families. These are also our challenges, but in different contexts. When we try to exercise more, make resolutions, or try to lose weight, we face similar dilemmas and challenges of changing behaviour. As part of the exercise, we named a personal change, explained why change was needed, explained what achieving such a change would look like and feel like. We waved a magic wand over it to make it all perfect and possible. We worked out what could get in our way. We identified what would help us to achieve this. Then we asked you to reflect on the exercise. Reflecting and making connections were features of each of the sections. It is reflection and thinking about what this means to your own practice that accelerates your learning. In exercise 2 and 3, you looked at a case example, hopefully your own case. You took a baseline of how you are currently practicing. In the written report you read, you were asked to identify 3 changes that were necessary to address what causes significant harm. You were asked to review your own practice and check whether these were clearly identifiable in the report, and if parents or families would share your understanding about what needed to change. We then asked you to fill in the change grid, identifying 1 change, why things were not good enough now and what good enough would look like in the future. We suggest you limit the number of changes you work on in child protection. We suggest 3, but no more than 5. This ensures 2 things. It keeps the focus on significant harm and stops you getting distracted with other needs and the inevitable problems that emerge in day-to-day casework. In section 2, there was information about writing the change statement. The change statement is directly linked to reducing significant harm. The 5 key principles of writing a good change statement were: make it personal. Think of the statement as being written specifically for that family. Make it personalised or customised statement for them. It should reflect their unique circumstances. You should use their words, so wherever possible, try to use the family's own words to describe the change. It's not always easy at the beginning of your work together, as you will be taking the lead. However, over time, the working relationship should develop, and the statement written initially by the practitioner can be rewritten using the family's words as they become more familiar with the work you're doing together and the relationship develops between you. You're reminded that you also needed to focus on what is the effect on the child. A good change statement should show the effect on the child, and also what needs to change. A good statement of change should clearly show what needs to be different in the future. And finally, is it written clearly? Make it easy to understand. Try to avoid jargon. Of course, not every one of these principles will be relevant every time. In exercise 4, you were asked to look again at the change statements you've written in previous exercises. This provided you with an opportunity to make some of the learning about how to write a good change statement and how to write the change grid and update what you'd already written. At this stage, you should have a change statement, not good enough, and good enough statements that you had developed and refined. Section 4 introduced the element of measure. It explained the national and personal outcome expectations of the 2014 Act and how steps to change provided a methodology for outcome scaling. It explained the way the evidence of not good enough establishes the baseline score of 2, and the goal of good enough is scaled as 8. In section 5, we focused on how to use the steps to change. Described as a journey from not good enough to good enough, the steps to change tool should be used to prepare beforehand and map the journey from 2 to 8 with a family. We used the analogy of a journey and how you'd use a route planner for a car journey. You would be clear of your starting point and your destination. If you wanted to travel from Bangor to Wrexham, we wouldn't just plan to get to Llandudno and then decide where we'd go next. In effective child protection, the steps to change is used to plan all stages of the journey, and this is done in advance. Section 5 provided the detail about how to use this practically and build these progressive steps. A sequence was recommended. Do you remember how it was developed and why? As a reminder, you have a 2 and 8 from the case conference. Then we go 3 to 7, first green shoots and nearly there. Then 5, midpoint on the journey, before looking at interim steps 4 and 6. The journey always keeps the children in mind. Their day-to-day lives should change. As a practitioner, you need to make sure you understand their day-to-day life and experience. Exercise 5 asks the practitioner to develop the steps on one of their cases. In Section 6, we looked briefly at disguise compliance and why it is such a concern for practitioners. Described as an intentional act by parents, whether it was done consciously or automatically, the effect of wrong-footing the social worker and the level of abuse is often underreported. It is these areas that keep practitioners awake at night thinking that they are missing something or should have acted earlier. We explored what disguise compliance is, its signs and symptoms. We explained how effective child protection and some of the more general principles is an antidote to disguise compliance. When there is a clear change statement, which is the focus of the practitioner, and progress is mapped out, there is so little opportunity to hide. We should know what is changing for the child in their day-to-day life. This is the most important test for us. How does all of this fit together? We have 4 elements of the jigsaw. Skills to have better conversations with families, identifying significant harm, keeping the focus on change throughout the child protection process, and knowing where you are and where you're going through steps to change. These are incorporated into child protection processes seamlessly. The change statement is prepared for presentation to case conferences, and steps to change are developed in the core group. There are 2 important aspects of implementing effective child protection that have been developed as part of this practice framework. These are the role of the practice mentor and the use of reflective practice. A practitioner was appointed into the role of the practice mentor. They met with individual workers on a one-to-one basis and in practice mentoring groups. The practice mentoring approach was developed with the aim of helping practitioners put effective child protection confidently into their day-to-day practice. In addition to practice mentoring, various interventions have taken place to develop the capacity of workers and the organisation to embrace reflective practice. This has included training for practitioners, the development of a reflective practice booklet by staff, and other project resources. This course is part of the Effective Child Protection Practice Resources. The aim was to create a comprehensive set of resources to help practitioners put effective child protection into practice. Further material is available from the Effective Child Protection Resource website. This brings us to the end of this Effective Child Protection course. Please take time to review your workbook and your reflections as you completed the different sections. Your workbook also includes information and some of the key points from each section. The course is structured so that you can go back to individual videos if you'd like a reminder about how to do a specific task. For example, as you write your change statement or develop steps to change. You can improve practice by doing and then reflecting on your learning. Thank you.